Joining us now in the Element Well Studios, Brent Bailey, Public Service Commissioner for Mississippi's Central District. Commissioner, thanks for coming on Middays.
Thank you, Gerard. Good to be here as always. Always. I know you've been traveling around a good bit and
have been
sharing your stories. I heard them coming in about your time on the coast.
Yeah, we've been carrying the SuperTalk flag all over the state. We've been having a lot of fun with that. Our state, we're so blessed to live in such a beautiful, fantastic state with great people coast to coast, and from the top up there on the border of Tennessee all the way down to the Mississippi Gulf Coast and all points in between. The people of Mississippi are great, and so it is our honor and pleasure to get out and about. I especially, I will say, do like traveling this time of year because our landscape, our countryside is so beautiful. You can see the trees starting to change a little bit. And, of course, the sun is shining and this time of year, which is always great, and puts a glimmer and a shine on the landscape. We enjoy it. But, all right, so this net metering issue is something that we've been talking about quite a bit on the program. You and I have had some private discussions as well, as you have.
Speaking of the sun shining, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. As I've asked you some questions, and you've been kind enough to answer those, respond to those, and explain things that are a little unclear. It gets a little technical, I think, in nature.
Most anything, it seems, in utility regulation can become complex.
Sure, and it's because it is a lot more of a diverse industry than it once was, and so the more diverse the industry gets, and by that I mean there are just multiple sources of energy, multiple players, multiple routes to market. It gets complex, it gets more sophisticated, and so that kind of amplifies you guys' role as regulators.
That's right.
It makes that more complicated.
Well, we still have our vertically integrated monopoly utilities that deliver the bulk of our power system. Today's technology and the emerging technologies we've seen and the ability to nearly seamlessly integrate that is what's opening the door for these innovations and these opportunities for economic development and investment in the state.
Yeah. So no doubt that I would say the role itself as a public service commissioner and the Public Service Commission's mission and its function, it's become more complex as a result of that.
We've gone, kind of making that evolution while we're still utility regulators. We're also, in certain cases, economic regulators as well, and have a role in that. And I'll share some of that with you later as we move through the conversation.
All right, so most recently, I guess, a somewhat contentious issue has been this net metering program, and also associated or incorporated in the program are some subsidies for households to invest, and schools as well, right, in solar panels and solar panel-powered electricity and energy. And so that's kind of come to the forefront. There are 3 public service commissioners.
There are.
2 voted for this program.
Including myself, yes, sir.
You and PSC Commissioner for the Northern District, Brandon Presley, and then for the Southern District, Dane Maxwell, who was on the program a couple of weeks ago. Yep. He voted in opposition of this program. The governor has also expressed his opposition to this program. So before we get into that and why people are on different sides of the fence on this, explain us exactly what the details of the program are, what the provisions are at a level that our audience can understand.
I'll do my best. So this is something that has been around since 2015. The original docket to look at net metering, distributed generation, and the incorporation, the ability for consumers to self-supply and the right to interconnect began that conversation back in, I think, January 2011 with a rule that came out in December 2015. Okay. And it's a very general rule, provides the opportunities. It does not allow for net metering. I know that word gets used a lot, but we really don't utilize net metering as traditionally defined across the U.S.
Okay.
We allow for a compensation of avoided cost.
Well, explain what it is first.
All right. Net metering, if in the true definition, would be for any excess generation that a resident or business provides back to the grid would be compensated a rate at the retail rate. So whatever you buy from the utilities, you get compensated for that same amount. If you're paying a utility 12 cents per kilowatt hour, whatever you generate and goes across the meter onto the grid, you get compensated for that. In Mississippi, we have not done that and still don't do that. We do what's called avoided cost, which is basically the wholesale cost of electricity minus all the other fees, charges, administration, fuel costs, all that kind of stuff. What is that least cost energy resource that's next available on the grid?
Okay.
Plus, we allow for a certain, what we call a value of distributed generation. So that's all these other savings that are built in when a residence or small business self-generates power and pushes it across the grid.
Okay.
You're not burning a fuel source. You're not losing electrons across the transmission and distribution grid. There's other resiliency and reliability factors built in as well. Now, they all have a value to them, which are often difficult to quantify, but there is a known benefit associated with this activity.
Okay.
So the Public Service Commission back in 2015 set that value of distributed generation at 2.5 cents.
Okay.
So avoided cost plus 2.5 cents would be what you, as Gerard, would be compensated for if you had a distributed generation system at your home or business for that went across. That did not change. That remains in place today. What we did was provide certain incentives for residential and non-residential, the opportunity to help create diversification in our energy marketplace, and help establish and build a new market segment to, quite honestly, this date, it's just sort of, I don't say languished, but just has not matured as if we've seen in many, many other parts of the nation and world. And so that is a decision that the Public Service Commission has been considering for the last 21 months, working through this process. A whole range of interveners have participated in this across the spectrum, and we did come out with a rule in July. Yes, and it was not seen favorably by certain parties. The utilities pushed back. We had a rehearing. We reconsidered some of the positions
At a
on
public
that.
hearing, right?
A public hearing, that's right.
And Commissioner Maxwell was on the program right after the hearing.
That's right. That is right. And we went back and reconsidered some of the technical changes as well as some of the financial aspects of that as well. And we came back this past Tuesday with a much more scaled down rule, but still incrementally gets us down the path to helping give customers that choice, that option through certain incentive aspects of that. The school component is going to be extremely valuable and important, I believe. I know throughout this process we've received letters. I've received a lot of phone calls from school leaders throughout the Central District. They're excited about this, that see the opportunity to incorporate this into curriculum, support the offset the energy needs, and that reduces the taxpayer burden. So of all the expenditures on energy can now be redirected somewhat into enhanced teacher salaries, to classroom supplies.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand that.
And supporting education.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but let me make sure I understand. So what you're saying is, if the schools were to install solar panels and begin to harvest the power from the sun to power the school facilities, likely are to also produce enough power that would be in excess of what they consume, they too would be eligible, right, to sell that back.
Yes, sir.
To the utility source, the utility electricity provider, which would bring their cost of total energy consumption down. And what you're saying is they'd have those funds available for other purposes in the school.
That is right. That is right. Sort of simplified way of saying it. It's not quite that easy, but that's a very simplified way of saying that.
And they've got to have special meters to go bi-directional as well, or is that?
I mean, today's smart meters, advanced metering infrastructure that virtually every utility in the state has adopted and done, it can read bi-directional energy flows.
So is there anything that the consumer has to do to say, hey, I want to send my excess to the power company and them send me a credit
we
for
have
it?
An application process. It's our distributed generation interconnection.
I mean, while it's happening, is it just automatic? The technology just handles it?
Once everything goes into place, you'll receive a credit or whatever on your bill. It will net out. I hate to say net out, but it will You will receive a credit on the bill at the end of every month. It zeroes out and starts the process over the next month.
But once they install all this, they don't have to do something on some regular basis to say, hey, send my excess up to the power company. It just happens within the infrastructure.
That's right.
It knows to do that. It's transparent.
Special
no
account
action,
setup.
no intervention.
That's
just
correct.
works out, and then you get credits that equal the amount you send.
The installer will work with the utility and the owner of the project, and all that gets
residential
done.
and schools, right? We're talking about commercial and residential.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back and talk some more with Brent Bailey, the Public Service Commissioner for Mississippi Central. In my view, we got Brent Bailey, the Public Service Commissioner for Mississippi's Central District in the Element Well Studios. Okay, so you were sharing with us the details, and I apologize for interrupting you. I just wanted to understand some of the technical aspects of how net metering works. And I think at the highest level we can sort of describe it is just a process whereby consumers of electricity that are connected to the power grid provided by utility providers, electricity providers, they can generate their own power if they have the means to do that. By law. That has to be the excess, right? Has to be
compensated for at a certain
purchased,
rate. That's right.
And so that goes into the overall supply of power, right?
Goes to your neighbor more than likely who takes advantage of that.
Okay.
But it's to the consumer's best interest to push as little power as possible across the meter. You want to use as much of it behind the meter so you do get that full retail
get the full
value.
benefit because they're selling it back at a lower rate.
That's right.
However, it's true in some states. I believe Arkansas is one, right?
Yeah, Arkansas next door. They
dollar for dollar.
Statewide net metering, both the cooperatives and investor-owned utilities. That was challenged in the courts, and the courts determined it was a valid fee, rate, charge, whatever that the utilities are have to respect.
Okay, so with respect to this recent action by the PSC, really no changes fundamentally to that program, right? The net metering specifically. What
the core of the program still there. The new parts are the incentive aspects of it
for purchase and installation of solar panels, right?
That's right.
Just a one-time flat dollar, as I recall, $3,000 is the figure.
Yep.
Okay.
For qualifying customers in that aspect, or a $2,000 incentive for backup battery storage systems.
Oh, okay.
And that has both the resiliency and reliability benefit, as well as helps you capture that energy that you produce. Store it and use it throughout a 24-hour period or more.
Yeah.
So you do get that full retail value, equivalent value of the kilowatt hour generated.
Yeah, I've looked into that, and typically they're associated with generators. The companies that make generators typically make those systems as well.
But with the innovation that's now going on in battery technologies, there's a lot more players in the market.
Doubt.
It's more competitive. The lifespan of these and the effectiveness is growing every day.
Yeah, it's an evolving technology, and advances are being made consistently, continuously, and so the cost comes down, the efficiency goes up, the capacity goes up. They're more practical. As time goes on, that's going to even get better. I kind of equate it to, in the old days, I remember selling hard disks that cost $75,000 for 40 meg on a mainframe, and now you can get several gig in your palm of your hand for nothing. Yep. So it went from $75,000 for 40 gig to nothing for like 100 gig in your hand, right? So actually it's 40 megabytes back then. All right, so just metaphorically speaking in a way that I can understand in my simple mind.
An important aspect of this rule as well, and the order and the guidelines for which the program is going to operate, and these incentives we talked about, they're not wide open. They're not forever ending. These systems come with guide rails around system size, maximum, minimum. We have participation caps as well even annual budgetary constraints on this as well. So it's not just go out there and spend and throw things around. There is very concise built-in consumer protection components, as well as budgetary, system size, as well as who qualifies. So it's not a wide-open program that's just going to flaunt millions and millions of dollars. It is very tightly constrained.
All right, let's get into the economics. How much has been authorized under this program?
All right, for Entergy, I believe the total, if you factor in both the solar and battery, is $6 million annually. and for Mississippi Power, both solar and battery or distributed generation is $3 million. And I know this gets pigeonholed as a solar program, but you read the rule. Our definition to distributed generation is wind, solar, hydro, geothermal, waste to energy, biomass, hydrogen, all these emerging technology we hear about. And even within the biomass sector, there's a wide range of technological and energy resource opportunities under there as well that will greatly benefit ag and rural communities.
So you said $6 million for energy. What was the other? Three. Okay. Well, because. And that's fine. It's a rounding error. But Rhino, as I recall, when I asked Mr. Canton that, he said 8 total. So if we're saying 9, I mean, I'm not going to lose any sleep over that. But that's on an annual basis,
and that's adjusted from the July rule. He was probably talking to July rule. So we've come down from that.
Okay. All right. So that don't sound like a whole lot of money to me. So here's a question I have then. So
we're saying, just to put in context. So we said Entergy, their top annual budget, I believe, what I just say, $6 million.
Yeah.
We authorize them to spend starting next year, $15 million a year on energy efficiency programs that all customers take advantage of.
Give me an example.
Home energy audits, HVAC tune-up, caulking, ceiling, direct install of high-efficiency lighting and other things like that.
So does that mean they'll pay consumers for that?
That's right.
Rebate them?
Rebates all the darn time.
And how do you get that? You have to apply for it?
Yeah, apply for it. We work with their approved trade allies. These are energy efficiency professionals that are certified and knowledgeable, and they work with the utilities to deliver these products.
Okay. And
all these systems, all these programs, these measures that we've allowed, they have a positive cost-benefit impact.
All right, so
for every dollar that they invest, you're getting a greater than $1 return on that investment.
Explain why the PSC has to get involved in that. Why do you have to authorize that?
It just really, in my view, helps open the door and provide.
No, I'm asking why does the PSC need to be involved, period? I'm not asking about the virtues of the program. I know that's what you're about to answer. I mean, why wouldn't they do that on their own?
Well, many times it's hard for customers to understand or access that really technical information they need. What are these low-cost, no-cost measures that they can get an immediate return on these actions taken? Utilities, I believe, by state law, say they also must not deliver reliable, affordable, but also efficient energy as well. And these are one of these means of helping us accomplish our statutory mandates as well.
I guess I'm not trying to be confrontational, Brent. You and I are close friends, and you know that. But what I'm saying is, why does government have to get? Why doesn't the energy economy realize, hey, it's really in your best interest to put these programs together? Is it maybe it's because they are a monopoly and they're a regulated monopoly, and you kind of got to prod them a little bit?
Well, their best interest is to sell as much product as they can.
I get it.
And whether it's a kilowatt hour or a million cubic foot of gas,
so they don't
or
want
whatever.
You to be efficient. Seriously.
So we try to help empower consumers as much as possible in doing this. And it's not just these programs. There's things we've done since I've been on the commission, and there's a lot of programs I'm inherited. Let me run through a couple real quick just so you kind of know our role as utility regulators, as economic development supporters, and even economic.
Yeah.
So one thing we did, we asked Entergy, looking at all the storm damage we've seen on the coastline, we've asked them to accelerate their wooden pole transmission structures. They had a plan to phase them out over the next 27, 29 years.
Okay.
We asked them to accelerate that and replace everything within 11 years. That's going to increase the cost, but that's going to provide a much greater resilient system. All these new technologies out there, whether steel, concrete, fiberglass, other composites, much higher wind load ratings, much higher ice load ratings. And if you've seen the damage we've had in South Mississippi and Louisiana over the last couple of years, we felt that was a good investment to accelerate the transition from wooden pole infrastructures, none against my forestry guys, but a much more robust composite other materials.
The effort to decrease the risk of loss of power.
As we've seen in Florida, not a transmission structure went down that I'm aware of because they invested billions and billions of dollars.
They've been working on it a while.
Since
I know
2004, when you had those 4 or 5 or 6 hurricanes cross there, they got really aggressive on transmission upgrades, undergrounding, things like that.
Okay.
We allow them to accelerate that investment.
Okay.
Natural gas side, we allow them through our supplemental growth program and their rural expansion initiative to extend services out to those areas that may not meet their typical financial metrics and criteria, because economic development, especially out to industrial parks that may not be right in the middle of a service area, that makes them more attractive for development and bringing in outside industry and creating jobs and an increasing tax base.
I get it.
And that's something that all ratepayers across the state help finance. But we do these projects across all 3 districts.
I get it.
And the local legislators love to see that kind of thing. And I'm just scratching the surface.
Hold on, we got a break right here. We're going to come back because I want to ask you about how we pay for these $8 million a year and how that works. I think that's of interest to people. Yep. And some of the other nuances in this program. So we've got Brent Bailey, Public Service Commissioner for Mississippi Central District in the Element Well Studios. We're coming right back. We've got Brent Bailey, Public Service Commissioner from Mississippi Central District. There are 3 Public Service Commissioners, just as there are 3 Transportation Commissioners. Right?
That's correct. Same districts.
Yeah, North, Central, South, in the exact same footprint.
That's correct.
Right, geographically speaking. All right, so we're talking about this net metering program, and that's really not even the appropriate description of it, is it?
No,
because it's been around a while.
That's why I call it a distributed generation program.
Okay. But at its core, it is subsidies, payments, right, to residents and also schools. Or what about commercial properties? They qualify as well?
Not for the rebates, not for the solar or distributed generation, but they could for potentially the battery backup system.
Okay, well, that was the other question. Is more than just solar panels qualify for this, right?
That's right. Our definition of renewable energy and distributed generation is across the board, across many different technology types.
Okay. So anything that meets whatever those specifications are, so are all of these, though, is there a requirement that any of these technologies, any of these other alternative energy sources that would be assets owned by and installed by the resident or the school, that they have to incorporate the ability to to provide their excess back to the electric company?
Not necessarily.
Is that a requirement? It's not
necessarily. Like I said, you really want to size those systems where you're using as much energy behind the meter as possible, particularly for your residential, non-residential.
Okay.
The school's going to be a little different because that will be systems allowance up to 3 megawatts DC in size.
Makes sense.
And done through a power purchase agreement arrangement that allows virtually the school district generation to be offset by that and to be credited to receive the credit is there. Okay. Again, it's
so
that's why I mentioned a minute ago. The schools, the thing's a little different than our traditional program. It just gives them a higher rate of return on those arrangements made with the third party developers to return that credit back to the school district.
I understand, but so. What's the underlying goal here, Brent? I mean, so really what you're trying to do is provide some financial assistance to homeowners and schools to make investments in these various forms of renewable energy, which does take some of the stress off the traditional grid.
That's right. We're sort of a very natural gas heavy state, as you probably aware, and I think we've talked about this before. Across the energy generation field in the state, nearly 80% of every electron generated in Mississippi is derived from natural gas as the generation fuel source.
Okay.
And you've seen what the markets have done over the last couple of years, nearly 400% increase over the last 2 years. We're
natural gas.
That's right, natural gas. And we had nearly 10 years of very stable, low natural gas.
$2 or so.
That's right. And now we've seen it, $7, $8, $9, $10, and that's going to have a real impact. Something the media hasn't picked up on, and I gave you a copy of our latest newsletter, and it explains it in there. We're working with the utilities to help minimize the impact this is going to have, these high natural gas prices. And one thing we did with Entergy on Tuesday, as you may or may not know, by the end of the year, there will be nearly a $400 million recovery deficit on the cost of natural gas.
Okay.
And if we were just to implement that and put it all into rates at one time to allow them to begin a recovery of that deferred cost of fuel, you're talking about a $30 or more impact on rates beginning February 2023.
Okay.
That would be just a punch in the gut.
All right, so
I'm kind of getting there. So what we did, we allowed them to begin implementing deferring part of that cost as well as slowly implementing at a rate of $2.01 a month beginning in November, going through April, for a total of $12 cumulative by April to begin that recovery.
Gotcha.
We also are going to put in, I think we talked about the settlement with Entergy based on some of the charges from Grand Gulf and others. So we're going to put $200 million of that as well. So we're really knocking that down in half and then giving a slow recovery of rates and deferring the rest over 20 months. And we're hoping that natural gas markets stabilize.
Gotcha.
And they begin to, get a real recovery. And we're also adjusting what they're allowed to recover on the cost of fuel. So there's a lot of things in that. So trying to make a long story longer or short, I guess, in my view, and the commission's views for the most part, by doing this, it shows that by allowing schools, businesses, residential, and others to help offset these increasing costs by investing in self-generation resources, beginning to build a new market, a new industry sector that really hasn't existed for the most part in Mississippi but has flourished in other areas, create jobs, bring innovation and new technologies here, and begin to help empower customers that, in most cases are beholden to individual monopoly utilities. And this is just one way, it's an incremental step to helping us accomplish that. And this is a long-term deal. It'll probably be years before we reach maximum potential of this program. It's going to be a learning curve for customers, for installers, for the technology providers. And like any place else, if you don't have that sustained policy, you're not going to invest in that state.
Okay, so it's $8-9 million a year. Mm-hmm. That really doesn't go very far, honestly. But the bigger question is, just to make sure I understand it, and for the benefit of our audience, who pays for that? How is that paid for?
Like our energy efficiency programs, like our resiliency ramp up, like these other extensions of services. It goes into the rate base, and it's spread across the rate payers. And when this program, if it does maxes out in 5 years, all it can do, you're looking at maybe $1 to $1.50 a month impact.
What's the max? What do you mean max out? How's that defined?
So we're talking like Mississippi Power. Okay. We're giving them $3 million a year for 5 years, $15 million total.
But is that the program? It's 5 years?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I wasn't sure if it was perpetual, but it's $3 million a year, and
we will revisit this in 5 years.
Okay. All right.
We can revisit it any time.
So for them paying consumers to some financial assistance to make these investments, they pass that on to their ratepayers with a slight increase in their rate to absorb those costs.
And this is a voluntary program. If nobody signs up for it, what costs go out there?
All right, well,
if nobody steps up for the incentive for the battery or solar, if the schools don't participate, then there's no cost.
All right,
very little. There's going to be some marketing and things like that.
What triggers the rate increase? Is it people participating in the program and then paying money out to them in the form of these rebates?
That's
or
right.
Do they just raise rates and just say, okay?
No, it's got to be as participation occurs. Okay. They come back every year.
There's formula for that.
That's
I assume a process
That's
for that.
Right.
They're getting applications approving them, money's going out. They increase the rates to cover that. So it's kind of a pay-as-you-go.
We do an annual rate redetermination with all utilities.
You look at that.
That's right.
Here's how much you paid out on that. Right. This is the rate offset to that. Make sure all that is jives.
We take a deep dive that when they come and supply us their books, it's normally on a dolly.
I'm sure.
And all those accounts and our folks go through that with a fine-tooth comb to look for any exception or inclusions that need to be considered.
So it is, man, this is maybe where the governor objects and maybe Commissioner Maxwell. I'm not trying to speak for them, though I've read their statements and comments. So, I mean, that's in the public realm. But it is a situation where people who don't participate in the program may realize a slight increase to their rates. They're essentially subsidizing the investments made by people who are participating in the program. That is true.
That is true to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So the next question I got about that.
But again, these systems do provide benefits across the customer base as well by offsetting and reducing fuel costs, transmission losses, things like that by doing generation at the point of consumption.
I get it. I think
it's difficult to quantify. I get it. But there are tangible, real, identifiable benefits that folks sometimes tend to neglect or not recognize.
I think, as you and I were talking offline, the question that certainly crosses my mind, and I think it does a lot of people, this is not like traditional competitive markets. This is a regulated industry. The question then becomes, well, why does government have to step in and say, this is good for you, and we think it's so good for you, we're going to give you money to invest in it. And by the way, your neighbors are going to pay for that. I mean, that's really the way this works, and I think that's why some people object to it, though I get it. When I found out from Mr. What's his name? Danton?
Canton.
Pardon me. When I found out from him, it's $8 million, I said, well, heck, that can't be but a few pennies a month at the end of the day.
It's not. It's really not.
And it's the principal aspect of it.
And just like I'm talking about, we allow utilities to go serve industrial parks to help. While that might not meet immediate cost metrics they would, guess what? It enhances the accessibility and sellability of that. And that's great for the local commodity.
Which should spur economic development.
That's right.
And I think
everybody pays to help get that there. And this activity occurs through all.
We can come back and finish it up. But I think that what's happening here, this is brought to the forefront the whole operational model and mission and function of this regulatory body. I don't think people thought about it, honestly, until now, and this has kind of brought it up. Hold your thought. We'll come back, because then I'm going to ask you about why do low-income households have a carve-out and a special a special deal for the studios with Brent Bailey, Public Service Commissioner, Mississippi Central District. Appreciate you staying on for the whole hour.
Well, I appreciate it. Certainly did.
This is a complicated issue, and I think it's one that folks have a lot of interest in, so I hope our audience as well appreciates that we got you here for the whole hour and trying to unravel some of these complexities. And in this particular case, you got a dissenting commissioner in Commissioner Maxwell, and we got the governor that really doesn't seem to be on board with this program as well. And before I let you talk about that, I just want to reiterate what we have established, which was a question that I had of when you authorize the utilities, and you do control their rates. The Public Service Commission controls their rates because they're a monopoly. And if you didn't, then things may go kind of off the rails. But so you control them. But in a case where you go to them and you say, we want you to roll out this program where you're going to provide incentives, in this case, financial assistance to customers for installation of renewable energy solutions in their homes and in their schools in this particular case. And by the way, we're going to let you offset your costs of that investment, of those incentives, of those rebates, in the form of raising your rates. Now, in this case, it's a very small, de minimis amount, and so I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. Heck, the global price of oil and gas has had way more impact, exponentially more impact on the cost we're paying for consumption of electricity and gas to our homes and our businesses than this would when you're talking about such a small amount of money. But I just want to make sure it is a pay-as-you-go, and they're not authorized to increase those rates until people start applying for those and receiving the rebates, meaning rebates are going out the door on their income statements, and they're able to raise their rates to cover that. That's the way it works. It's not like, hey, go raise your rates and just wait for people to show up and jump into this program. Doesn't work that way.
Right. That's
All right, I want to make sure that's clear. All right, now, next question is, there is a carve-out, as I understand it. Half of this money authorized, and you've shared with us now, it is $6 million, right? Is it 6? Did I get that right? For Entergy?
6 total.
Per year.
Yeah, I think it's, oh my gosh.
Is that right? And then 3 for Mississippi Power?
That's right.
Okay. So $9 million a year allocated for them to provide rebates to consumers to install these renewable energy solutions.
And even within that, it's differentiate between distributed generation and battery backups.
Okay.
There's
some, of course, everything's complicated. But, I mean, in general, that's kind of the total aggregate dollar value of the program. All right, so half of that, though, as I understand it, has to go to so-called low-income households. They're not really so-called; they're defined right in the policy.
That's another change we had. So it's no longer half; they're the only ones eligible for that now.
Oh, really?
Yes, sir.
So only households whose household income is below 250% of the federal poverty level.
225%.
Oh, it went from 250 to 225. Is that since the hearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
So did somebody show up and say, "Hey, we really think you ought to put all this in the low income households"?
There was.
Okay.
Utilities.
and then there was another set of vote. You guys had to vote on
sir.
those changes,
Yes,
right?
yes,
and 2-1 again.
Yes, sir.
All right, so I'll ask you the same question, Brent, that I did Mr. Canton.
Okay.
Who, by the way, for those of you that just joined us, Mr. Canton, Jeff Canton, is the president of the Renewables Energy Industry Association. I think I got that right. Bottom line is the people who sell solar panels and all these other renewable energies for the two-state area of Louisiana and Mississippi. And I asked him if this is such a great deal for our economy, for our environment, for ratepayers, for the utility companies, such a great deal just overall, why are we only making it available to these households with incomes below 225% of the federal poverty level? It was half then. Now you're telling me it's 100% goes to them. Seems like we want everybody to participate in this program. Go ahead.
You're going to. So I tend to agree. The program should be available to anybody. And I understand the low-income aspect of it because Mississippi is a high energy burden state.
Okay.
You know, what is our average household income in Mississippi, and where do we rank in the nation? You probably
50th.
All right.
We're last.
And while we do have rates are generally below the national average, as a percentage of monthly annual expenditures, we're in the upper echelon as far as amount of money we put out to pay for energy.
Okay.
And that's because you think where we're at. You just said low economic development. We're in a very high climate area. About a third of our population lives in some sort of manufactured housing, which is not exactly energy efficient. We don't have statewide construction. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into place of why we consume more energy than the average American here. So if we can help low-income folks that have a higher energy burden go down certain paths.
We'll have to get you back on and talk about that some more. Because we got to go.
I didn't know it was going to be a short segment. I cranked it up a little bit.
I hear you.
But there's just so many things we do as a commission. I understand that it's a agency that's not fully understood, and I learned that out on the campaign trail.
We'll get you back. I'll tell Alex. We'll get you back on. We'll go through that some more.
All right, man.
We could talk 30 minutes just about that one. We're coming right back. Thank you, Brent.
Thank
Appreciate
you so much.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Stay